Yes, I just said what's up to people that, yeah, I was just like reaching out to them spiritually and just acknowledging their presence.
Okay, good to go.
Good to go.
Oh my goodness.
All right, so just so you know, Charlemagne, we usually, when we go live, we just kind of sit around and just banter to try to let some people come in. And typically our sit around and banter at the beginning will last anywhere from 20 to 50 minutes.
Charlemagne is clearly a fan of the show.
He's kept his head down when he's watching the show, but I mean he's watched enough that I think he gets the deal.
I've actually only watched a little bit. Okay. I think it was when you had Peter Quinones on. Like, okay. Yeah, I kind of, like I said, I kind of just stumbled into this scene, and yeah, I don't know much about what goes on in it, but it's been interesting so far. I guess for people showing up from my end, I mean, this is kind of like, I guess you wouldn't call yourselves post-libertarian, although that's what I would say the slur is for this group of people. But I mean, you're interested in liberty, right? And you're interested in defeating the left, and yeah, that's basically what's going on in this general area. Definitely a lot of base people in this area, it seems.
I think that Matthew messed that up when he went on. I think that Matthew messed that up when he went on Pete's show, because this post-libertarian name, that could have just as easily been reasonable people. Like, there was no real reason to have another name, because I think that he was saying very reasonable things. And for the first half of the episode, maybe they were in sort of an inflammatory manner or an inflammatory style, but everything that he was saying was exceptionally within the realm of just normal conversation for people who wanted to see liberty.
I actually, when I went on that show, the first time I went on Pete's show, I got an overwhelmingly positive response. So this was like, I don't know, it was 6 months ago, something like that. I went on and kind of started talking about some of these. It's sort of maybe trying to bridge the gap between Mises and Burnham. I was sort of like trying to bring Burnham's ideas and just introduce them to libertarians. And I got a really overwhelmingly positive response right away. Like, the people were like, these are, a lot of people hit me up and said, I was already thinking this. It's crazy. I'm so glad somebody finally said this. And, I don't know. I got a really positive response at first. And then, I don't know, a day or two later, then things kind of started going south.
Is there any particular event that comes to mind when things may have gone south that you could
I went on Liberty Lockdown with Clint Russell, and a guy named Venermani or Cyprian joined me on that, and he spoke very, very bluntly, and I happen to agree with a lot of what he said, but in hindsight, he agrees that he probably should have communicated it differently, and I kind of tried to do that in real time. I kind of tried to say, okay, so that's a really, really harsh way of saying that. So maybe the more dialed back way would be this. And it didn't really do any good. It was my mentions were just absolutely
and you still get blamed for saying shit that you didn't even say. So yeah. That's pretty great. I just want to say that Matthew, before he says he has a headache, and I believe him, because he said hello and recognized several people in the chat and said hello, and it was before we were streaming. So maybe it would be nice to say hello to the people that you fake said hello to into a void earlier.
Yeah, I said, oh, look, Academic Agent and Skeptical Ways are in the chat. What's up, guys? And I said, okay, now we're going to go live.
Yeah, you did say that.
Yeah. All right.
Well, so I'm kind of interested in, so I used this word liberty earlier, and I like to make the distinction between liberty and freedom. And freedom is basically this concept where there's no force, there's no authority acting over you, and everyone else can basically do whatever they want. But the state of liberty is more like a positive state, and I think liberty is increased by order. Liberty is a product of order. And for example, I'm at liberty to travel across the country in a car, and I have that liberty not from any natural circumstances, but because we have this ordered structure around it called civilization. I actually increase my liberties through these collective, cooperative entities. What do you guys think about freedom versus liberty?
I like that. I like that definition of it, particularly the connection of liberty with order. That was a very big aha moment for me in reading Moldbug. When he connected that, there's that one section in the Muses to Carlyle. I think it's in the first chapter. There's that one section where he just outlines how when people are talking about liberty, what they're referring to is a state of order, and a state where emergent order is the highest form of order. And so that, like, getting to the point of absolute order is what it would mean to create liberty. And then that's kind of where I think it's at that point that things kind of jump off in a few different directions, where some people take that to be, I don't know, like a justification for various different types of behaviors. And the question is, which of those behaviors is most advisable from an ethical standpoint, and then from a pragmatic standpoint. And I would argue that the two are the same thing. That the thing that is most pragmatic is going to be the most ethical, and the thing that's the most ethical is going to be the most pragmatic. And that if the two aren't the same thing, it means you're not evaluating the situation correctly in some sense. So that connecting liberty with order like that was super compelling to me, and then it's been beyond that point that I'm like, where do we go now? What's the next step?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a broad question. Could you narrow that a bit?
So we've restated, like we have reestablished the ground on which we're having the conversation now by giving an actual positive, concrete definition of liberty, rather than liberty being this sort of hypothetical, abstract. We've created this ground where we have a specific type of liberty. You know, we have a direction to travel. So what's the road that we're going to take to get to that point where we achieve order, but with remaining within ethical grounds, and ultimately doing it the most cost efficient way?
Okay, so yeah, I have an answer to this. One of the problems we have now in terms of creating order is something that comes out of cooperative measures, people cooperating with each other willingly, and in what we call civilization. And the way things are set up now, and you see this even on the right, is we're all kind of living in this Marx brain mode of thought, where everything is viewed on like these class relationships. I'm working on a blog on this right now, so I'm still kind of developing these thoughts, but this is a big problem I see. You see some people frame it as high, low versus middle. A lot of people really hate the middle class. A lot of people love the mythical working class, which I don't even believe really exists in the United States to any degree that people would agree on the definition of. Like, I don't even know what working class means. I mean, I know people who, work industrial factory jobs and they make six figures, right? And it's like, okay, is this guy working class because of the type of work he does? Is he not because of the amount of money he makes? So I think we kind of just need to get rid of this. I mean, one of the fundamental things people need to realize about MAGA is that the whole MAGA movement was fundamentally middle class, and it was a middle class revolt against the elites suppressing the middle class from actually rising up to circulate into the elite, right? And bring in ideas into the ruling elite that are pro-American, because the ruling elite is very anti-American now, and they use their clients, which you might call the working class, in this high-low versus middle alliance against the middle class. So in some sense, the working class is kind of set up as the enemy of the middle class. I don't really think in terms of these class distinctions, but if you look at the way politics is framed by the ruling elite, it is set up this way. And you look at some of the populists, and they all, especially the young populists, the Zoomers, they tend to appeal to this mythical working class, and they use imagery like construction hats and oil rigs and this sort of thing. And it's like, is that? I mean, the United States never really had a working class, like a factory class, in the same way that the European nations did. And Europeans complain a lot about American ideas, being imported to their respective countries, and they're justified in saying that. But I think we've brought in a lot of European class conflict into the United States that doesn't really have a place here. And I think we need to stop thinking in terms of like the middle class being the enemy. I mean, in reality, the middle class is the vast majority of Americans at this point, and they're trying to reduce that into the client class. I don't like to say working class because it's a very muddy idea, like what this even means. So
it's kind of like each of the classes is like an ethos that people embody. And
yes,
so it doesn't necessarily reflect your actual economic class or your actual
exactly.
Your actual exact culture necessarily. It's your we have these archetypes that are kind of fixed in us. They're like baked into us, probably through I would imagine through Hollywood. We have each of these classes has been archetypically implanted into us so many times that people naturally begin to embody them.
Yeah, it's like this sub-ethnicity, basically. Like working class is an ethnicity, just like white is an ethnicity, or even different races of whites or ethnicities. And it's the same for middle class. Like it's a behavioral. It is partially economic, but it's also very cultural as well. And there are many other class divides other than these two. There's male and female, and whatever else now, and then there's you can just come up with a million of them. I mean, there's race, religion, like there's all these class divides, and the working and middle class are the essential ones in how the ruled are manipulated into being in these like fake setup conflicts with each other by the ruling elite, and they're really just kind of pointless conflicts ultimately, where we really have no reason to actually even acknowledge this working class versus middle class dynamic, because in the end we're all being they're looking to turn us all into this client class of slaves anyway. So our interests are fundamentally the same. I guess in some sense the clients are not like the true clients of the state who are totally dependent on welfare and all that. I mean, this is something people have to realize too, is like this client class, the voter bank that is dependent on the state for welfare and health insurance and all this stuff. I mean, these people are utterly on the hook to the ruling elite. And so they kind of actually are your enemy in one sense. I mean, they're like the foot soldiers of the enemy. And you kind of have to realize that a lot of these people are never going to vote for right-wing policies or policies that dissolve the welfare state, because they're attached to it in a way that they're just slaves to it. They can no longer break away from it. Like their very existence depends on receiving their food stamps or whatever. And this is a huge problem. The middle class does not want to end up in this situation. And people who might call themselves working class don't want to end up as clients either.
That's kind of the gambit here is creating a permanent client class that through all sorts of various technocratic means, they literally don't have the capacity to pull themselves out of that dependent relationship. They're the whole you'll own nothing and you'll like it.
Yeah, and those guys will never be your friend, right? Like once you're owning nothing and happy, they're now just like permanently part of the grayed out NPC foot soldier of the ruling elite, and that's just not the type of person you need to appeal to.
Part of I just lost my train of thought.
While you find it, I would say to anybody, it seems that there's some new people who are watching this, and so we've been doing the show for, I guess, not quite a year, or maybe coming up on a year, but the observations that Matthew and I look similar, those have sort of fizzled out, but you can always tell when it's sort of a new audience. I will say, and this is not just a cheap plug, but go back and watch the previous episode if you think that the two dudes on the screen look similar. It would be myself, Matthew, and Josh Rayner. Is his last name?
That's correct.
Yeah, go check out that episode, and you will have your socks blown off. So hopefully by now Matthew has remembered what it is that he was going to say.
I don't remember what I was going to say, but I did remember that we need to do our little ad read here, for our beloved sponsors, Paloma Verde CBD, very good CBD products. I actually have both of them here with me today. I've got the gummies. These I've got the strawberry lemonade ones. Steven has the green apple, and then they've got the oil as well. That I've been taking this when I get a headache like I have today. And it's interesting. I don't know why, but I had never actually thought of CBD as something that you would use like for an acute thing, like a headache. I always thought of it as like a long-term thing, but or a chronic thing. But I've started putting it under my tongue when I start getting a headache like this, and it definitely takes the edge off. So,
well, Carlos also sent me some of the dog treats and an oil for dogs as well. And I will say, I've been barking anxiously much less, and I don't need my Thunder shirt as often. So those seem to work pretty well also.
There you go. PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Use promo code KING and get 25% off any order over $75. And it's a small, it's just a family-owned business. It's just Carlos and Vanessa. We visited them when my wife and I went down to Texas last month, and dropped in and hung out with them, spent an evening, watched the U.S. men's national team play a game. And Carlos is a really, really good guy. We had a good conversation, drank beer and had a good talk. So it's really good to be able to support good people like that, and to help them, shout out to the other show that I'm on, Wealth, Power, and Influence, to help them build their wealth, power, and influence. There's a little bit of an intersection of interests there, where it's in my interest to have good people around me and to support them, and it's in their interest to start this company. So the fact that they have good products is basically just a bonus. So so PalomaVerdeCBD.com and use promo code KING. Okay, so we were talking about the this permanent client class, and the whole World Economic Forum gambit of you'll own nothing and you'll like it is going to get people dependent upon the system, get permanently plugged into the system. And what it reminded me of, what I was going to say, is I can't remember who I saw tweet this morning, but I saw someone who pointed out that with these, to keep this YouTube friendly, so we can keep this channel for the time being, these medical treatments that are all the rage these days. Someone pointed out that with something like 5 to 10% of people being having something like their immune system disabled, something along those lines, like not only does that just affect that person and make that person completely dependent upon the system, but now everyone who is related to that person it fundamentally alters their life. Now they have this person that they have to support, that they have to forego other things and focus on supporting and caring for this person through I guess the rest of their lives. Who knows how long a lot of this stuff lasts. So this effect of you don't have to affect the majority of the people in the population directly. You just have to affect a small minority, and then by default it's going to affect everybody else, because ultimately every society lives and dies and turns on the most intolerant minorities, and they're basically creating a permanent intolerant minority by creating a giant serf class like that.
Yeah, I think isn't it 80% of the population has enjoyed this new medicine
Right.
now? And it's okay, well, it kind of, in terms of the resistance, I mean, at this point, it doesn't really, it's pretty clear that you're not going to get a majority of people, or even close to it, to decline the medicine. So that battle's already lost, right? So yeah, you're right there. And the healthcare system in general is one of the ways even if you don't want the medicine, your healthcare is going to be unaffordable, right? Because not just because of the inflation, but just in general, healthcare prices are insanely expensive because of the subsidies that the government provides. And it basically, the problem with all of the healthcare system is it's not even close to a free market, right? You can't compete across state lines and all this for health insurance. So it's set up to where healthcare is vastly more expensive than it ought to be, and it's basically impossible to pay for it unless you get insurance. And to get insurance, you basically have to be employed, and to get employed, there's certain restrictions on it, right? So you're never going to be able to, if you get sick and you're just sort of on your own and you need healthcare, you just won't be able to afford it. So it kind of forces you into becoming this client, right? That's like their main vector of forcing everyone to be dependent, which is just making healthcare so ridiculously unaffordable through their regulations. You can't bring new novel medicines or treatments to the market. You have to go through the FDA. You're not allowed to compete on even terms. The government has infinite money. So when the government's paying for it, obviously the pharmaceutical companies and hospitals are just going to raise their prices indefinitely because you have a buyer that will pay an unlimited amount of money for your product, right? So they just price everyone out of receiving healthcare, and this is how they make everyone dependent on the system. Even if you don't actively participate in it, you're just not going to be able to afford healthcare through it. And this, I think, this is one of the main mistakes a lot of the populists make, especially the Zoomers. I was writing a blog about some of what they're doing a few months ago, but I never published it just because I don't really like criticizing other people on the right too strongly, and I couldn't find a way to do it without doing that. But the core problem I see with a lot of the Zoomer populist types, and this is like Nick Fuentes' crowd, and he even said on stream with Sticks X and Hammer a few days ago that he still believes in like the system in some level, like we could change it basically. And what I see them wanting to do is they want to take control of the government and build like a welfare system for the working class, and working class is just a cipher for white people basically. And it's like, that's not gonna work though, because I feel like I just want to like beat them over the head with the Managerial Revolution by James Burnham.
Yeah.
It's like the whole way this works is that the managers are in charge, and if you try to outmanage them, you're just going to lose. So like if you have populist candidates come in and they're like, all right, now we're just going to have a welfare state for the working class, for Americans, and not for foreigners, it's like you're still not really going to improve your circumstances that much. And like frankly, I think they think we need this welfare state for the working class because it's impossible to pay for healthcare if you're not part of it in some way. But it's like you need to get to the actual core problem and remove all the problems remove the monopolization of the healthcare system in the United States that the government has put in place. Like that's the core problem. Your solution can't be like come up with a better welfare state. That's kind of what I see the populists trying to do in their rhetoric. And I don't really think that's actually that's not going to be a solution. They're just going to waste their time. And it really pains me to see energetic young people wasting all their time. I mean, someone just posted in chat just like a percentage, and it reminded me. I mean, if you look at how your healthcare is actually paid for out of your paycheck, like the companies actually pay for the vast majority of your actual coverage, right? And it's like that's money you could be earning in your salary, but like the amount of money that the corporation you're employed for, if you're employed for a corporation, pays for your healthcare is just insane. Like the insurance costs, right? It's crazy. And yeah, you can't afford that unless you're part of the system in this way. So it's like, yeah, I see the Zoomers as just like the Zoomer populace just really not understanding the actual problems in their way, and sort of just falling into this trap of participating in the system. Like basically I see the populace as just sort of national socialists, really. And I don't mean that in the derogatory sense. And it's like, that's the whole managerial game. And if you're just going to be a national socialist, you're still just playing their game, and you're not going to win it. And I hate to see so much energy wasted on what I see as an ultimately losing strategy, because the system is perfectly set up to deal with management, managerialism, which is what National Socialism ultimately amounts to. Like you have to break out of that frame, get out of this Marxist frame, and actually tear up the managerial system by its roots. So that's my thoughts on all that.
Do you think that part of that is simply their age and lack of exposure and experience, and maybe there's hope that?
Well, it's part of how do I say this? it's partly the fault of like libertarian messaging. Like Zoomers hate libertarians; they think they're very cringe, and to a large extent, they're correct. They're just like, you just care about like capital and money and having these free markets and making a lot of money. And the messaging from libertarians is just totally wrong on this, because like Zoomers, just populists, just they don't care about capitalism. They don't care about free markets. They just want their country back. And you need to, if you're a libertarian and you're interested in liberty, you need to explain to populists on the right, the MAGA people, like how your solution is going to get their country back. Like they don't care about capitalism and free markets at all. In fact, if you start talking about that, they instantly start associating you with this old guard, right, who uses, like the neocons use this sort of rhetoric, and the neoliberals use this capitalism rhetoric and free markets, even though they don't mean it. And this sort of stuff just has to be done away with, right? Like libertarians have just dropped the ball on messaging so much that they've completely lost the modern young right winger, and like, you guys obviously are pursuing a sort of different strategy, and like this is the actual strategy. Like it's all about culture, right? They only care about culture. How are we going to just completely demolish the color revolution that has happened in the United States? And I don't care about economics at all, basically, is their perspective.
If you're trying to reach an audience that wants to win their country back, that wants to take their country back, then it's not just that you have to tell them that your strategy is going to help them take their country back. It's that your strategy has to actually do that. And the libertarian strategy that they want to improve messaging on is saying, basically, stop trying to take back your country and just have it. And if you stop trying, then everyone else will stop trying too, or something like that. That just doesn't compute at all. And so it actually winds up being, you were talking a minute ago about, you have like the elites or the ruling class or the political class, or whatever you want to call it, that has a vested interest in creating this dialectic between the lower class or the working class and the middle class, or whatever the two categories were you said. And that dialectic actually ends up working against the middle class, because they just wind up fighting a bunch of people who aren't like their actual enemies. They're like fighting the weapon instead of fighting the person wielding the weapon. And that's actually, as I tried to solve this, I'm trying to like keep going back further and further in history. I actually got back to the conception of liberalism and capitalism, together as an entire unit, because ultimately this was an idea that was spawned by the aristocrats. It was spawned by the ruling class itself, and specifically not the monarch class, but by the non-monarch aristocrats. So it basically was conceived of liberalism, and with it capitalism, communism, libertarianism, all these different isms that are all subsets of liberalism were all conceived by merchants. And that's the entire ethos is all directed at undermining established order for the promotion of the individual will. And if you take a thing like the market and just set it free, you're not going to get the outcome that you think. The natural instinct is that it's going to degenerate in all senses. So libertarians are not just not messaging their thing well, and they're not just selling a thing. They're not just selling nothing. They're actually selling something that's actively bad, that works against their own interests and the interests of the people they're trying to sell it to. And that was the kind of the message, I guess, that we came onto the scene to start trying to get out there. And that's how we wound up becoming enemies of the LPMC, apparently.
And that's one of the things that we had said kind of early on, is that libertarians like to fancy themselves as too smart to be used for useful idiots, when in actuality they often are, and certainly will be in the future for when things begin to get real evil. A lot of this free market, it's going to be in air quotes, the free market rhetoric and private companies needing to take action is in fact going to be used to facilitate some actual evil in this world.
Yeah, and You mentioned individualism there, or individual liberty at some point, and this is another thing that libertarians fail on is the modern right, they do care about liberty, but they don't care about it in this like autistic way that libertarians do, in this individual extremist point of view. I mean, like they do want liberty, and they want to be free, but not at the expense of the collective they view as the nation. And I think this is one of the key compromises that libertarians need to make. I mean, the MAGA people, they do want to be free from the evil state we find ourselves under, and they do want a much less intrusive state, a much smaller state. I would think it would be amenable to the libertarians if they could figure out a way to cooperate with them. But they get turned off when you talk about individualism, because it's fundamentally not their concern. Their concern is the nation, right? And what they want to know, if you're a political party, if you're libertarians, what they want to know is if you're going to take power, like how are you going to defeat the left, right? Like with the libertarian, this is what I've been talking about in terms of the monarchism stuff, and like in my conversation with Pete and Mark Clare and a few others, right? Like you need to, what the Libertarian Party needs to do is basically say, like, we want political power, we want to take control of the state, and when we have control of the state, we're going to use the state to grind the communists in the powder, and then rule with an iron fist from there out, and never allow progressives to take root in the country again. And for the most part, we won't intrude on your life, but obviously there's going to have to be some government. Like the libertarians, even if they took over the government, if you dissolved it, it would just be utter chaos from there out, right? Like, so I mean that's like the realist perspective. And if you're just a libertarian and you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna go into Congress, and I don't even know what they do these days, just complain about regulations or something. Like the Libertarian Party is kind of a leftist party at this point anyway, which is another problem. But like
conquest.
But if genuine libertarians actually manage to take over the party again, the message can't just be like this stupid crap about like dissolving the state. I mean, no one wants that. No one in the country wants that. So what the hell are you doing, right? It's like it's not cool and heroic to just like completely fail to achieve any of your ideals in even the smallest sense. Like libertarians tend to do this thing where they're like, oh, like, I'm just, no matter what, even though I'm never gonna, I mean, the libertarian movement is like one of the greatest failures of all time. There's a whole book on this, right? The Betrayal of the American Right. Rothbard wrote this. Rothbard wrote a book published not that long ago, posthumously, I think, about how libertarianism is an utter failure, right? That's what the book is about. So it's like, that's not a good thing. Like you need to fix your idealism so that you can actually get anything done, because libertarians have gotten nothing done for like 100 years. So like, what are you doing, right? And of course, I'm referring to the Libertarian Party here in particular. Obviously, like the Mises Institute, for example, has done a great job preserving and building on Austrian economics. But in terms of political power and cultural power, there's just like nothing. So
the thing is, if you were to get to a point where, say for whatever reason, given whatever means possible, you got to the point where you could dissolve the state, where you could like induce it to dissolve itself. You could like, you reach a point where 100% of the population all agrees at the same time, yes, no more state. Like, assuming you got to that point, however possible, you're going to have a state to prevent new states from popping up. Or you're just like, you completed the greatest act of persuasion of all time, and you're just going to let it go. Like, even taking the argument on its own terms, there's going to have to be a government. So the case that our friend Andrew at Popular Liberty makes is, he's like, libertarians want to be able to govern themselves. Everybody else wants someone to govern them. So then why don't libertarians become the people governing other people?
Yeah, I was going to say
it's a match made in heaven.
Yeah, listening to Charlemagne just talk for the last little bit here, my thought immediately was just how many messages that you were going to get, if you haven't already, from a guy named Andrew.
Yeah. He actually, so you should talk to him to Andrew about his First of all, his theory of archetypism, and then a fairly unique, I don't even know what you would call it, a piece of legislation. I'm not sure exactly, called the anti-tax. It's based on using a sovereign wealth fund to basically privatize the government. And he has engineered it incredibly well. I think you would find it very interesting as a thing that actually plays on natural human behavioral incentives to try to put people like libertarians in the driver's seat by basically just rearranging market incentives so that the market is incentivized to protect the private government and to keep it alive. So,
and with that, maybe Matthew could talk a little bit about how, if people were interested in finding out more about Andrew, they might be able to do that. And before he does that, I would like to put up a question for Charlemagne so that he has time to think, during this, because it's a little bit of a two-parter. But I was just kind of wondering where you would say that you were at before you stumbled upon Moldbug's blogs, and how that may have changed your outlook along the way, and how different is where you were then to in comparison to where you are now. How much of a change in your ideology or methodology has been, outside of just kind of things changing so much over the past couple of years. And then the sort of part two of that is, I loved reading the Managerial Revolution, and I think that you and I agree on a lot of the observations, but I do seem to see a little bit of optimism, much more than I have, certainly. And so I was just wondering if I'm getting that right, and what might the reason be for that. But sit tight, because Matthew has a very important message to deliver currently.
So remember those two really, really, really long questions for a minute here while I read this ad.
Remember them.
Okay, so calling all Hoppians and fans of late Rothbard, Mises GOP is here and needs your help. Are you sick of constantly theorizing and seeing nothing come to fruition? Are you tired of the same old platitudes and tired rhetoric? Now is your chance to help make a real difference for you and your community. We're setting out to take over local governments, nullify the COVID regime, and put an end to taxation with the anti-tax. We need candidates of good moral character in red areas of red states to step forward and run for local office. If you're interested in supporting localism, the anti-tax framework, and fighting back against the COVID regime, then you can help by becoming a supporting member today. No amount is too small. Even $1 a month can help us turn ideas into reality. And if you want to give a one-time donation, we ask that you break it into 12 equal parts, as this aids in our planning for the future. So this is our friend Andrew of Popular Liberty. He has started a political organization to actually pursue some of these goals for real. And his first candidate that he has recruited is Buck Johnson, the host of the Counterflow podcast. He's going to run for local office in his town there in Lockhart, Texas. And this is a way of actually taking a pragmatic step forward in a way that is in accordance with, by and large, it's in accordance with, I guess, like libertarian orthodoxy. But it's actually an innovative approach to beginning to shift the burden of this managerial behemoth onto the people who created it, and not onto those of us who are just suffering under that load. So if you want to know more information, then there's a link in the description of this video, or if you're listening to the podcast later on, there'll be a link in the show notes. And or you can go to on Twitter to at GOP Mises, and you can follow them there and get all the information there. Okay, so I don't remember what those two questions are, Charlemagne, but if you do, then hat tip to you, go for it.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, in terms of my introduction to Moldbug, which really, I guess, triggered like my further rightward shift after being stuck, I guess. It must have been like 2017, I think I started making the videos. In 2016, for sure, I was basically just really big into Jordan Peterson at that point, as a lot of people were. So like my main ideological feed, I guess, was Jordan Peterson and the whole sphere of people around him, like Dave Rubin and all these classical liberal quote unquote types. I wouldn't really call them that exactly, but that's who I was following. I mean, most the same people basically everyone was following at that point if they weren't already further to the right. And it wasn't until 2015, 2016 really that I started getting interested in politics at all and exiting the default liberal phase of life that university puts you into. So I mean,
that was
fast. I guess when you think about it, it's pretty fast ride. Like I didn't get into politics really until 2015, 2016. And then, by 2017 I'm reading Moldbug. And then also Julius Evola and, all kinds of other crazy shit. So yeah, it was, I mean, it was pretty funny. It was around, I think it was around Christmas 2017. I was like, this Jordan Peterson stuff is cool, but seems like stuff's getting pretty crazy. So I better read something. I need to read this Julius Evola stuff to radicalize myself because I'm not radical enough. So
your next post should be like from Mises to Carlyle. You should go from Peterson to Evola.
Yeah, it was really like autistic progression because I mean my thought process was like I must radicalize myself because it's getting crazy and I'm not radical enough. So I'll just read Revolt Against the Modern World, cold turkey, and see what happens. So I did that. While also being really into Jordan Peterson, which was weird. That was good. Also a great author. Someone recommends Dugan in chat. I hate Dugan. Dugan is anti-West. Fuck that guy. Don't listen to anything he says. If you're a Russian, fine, but I'm not a Russian. So if you're not Russian, don't read Dugan and ignore everything because ultimately he's trying to subvert you and turn you into a client state of the Third Rome.
This is great. Speaking of that, just sort of an aside, I have a thing with accents and the way people speak and stuff like that. I'm just a kind of a weirdo. But I mean, were you born in Canada or you like spend time there? Matthew's also Canadian.
Nope, I'm 100% a Southerner. Don't have a Canadian accent at all. If I do, it's entirely accidental. But I don't really know where my
university.
No, I don't know why I have just I guess a neutral accent. Like I don't suppress it at all, or like some people think I'm suppressing my Southern accent, but I don't. I just kind of don't really have one. I mean, if I'm in a more informal setting and maybe have a bit of alcohol, like I'll sound my yats will come out, I guess, as we call them. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, for what it's worth, I went to high school in Canada and spent a few years there and had a lot of Canadian friends. And I'm one of the people that I pick up accents just based on whoever I'm around. I just subconsciously start mimicking people's accents. And so when I was in Canada, I had a very distinct Canadian accent, and apparently Steven thinks I still do, and it's super triggering to him. I don't know why, but
no, but I've never
really gets
heard,
triggered by it.
You must have listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson if you use the word university for college. I mean, in America,
no, it's because I hang out with British people a lot, and I pick up their lingo. Because apparently college I think the words even mean something different from one another in Britain. So you have to use the word university to talk about college in the United States. So yeah, that's the reason there.
Go ahead, Steven. You're muted.
Sorry, it's my first day. I did want to touch upon while we were I'll bring it back to the videos and stuff in a second. But I noticed that you had started working out, and actually in the chat there was quite a bit of workout talk earlier. Is that something that's new, or is that like is that something that you and some of your cohort are getting into right now, or how did that all come about?
I mean, I've done some amount of lifting and fitness stuff for years. My local friend group have been doing workout nights for I don't know, like a year or so, maybe 2 years, where they actually have a squat rack and everything. So I've been doing that for probably just about a year now, going to the Monday and Wednesday meetups at my friend's house and just working out with the boys. It's pretty casual. we don't take it super seriously, but I mean, we do take it seriously, and yeah, it's good stuff. I'm very much into mind, body, and spirit, and I think everyone needs to be working on all three of those pretty diligently. So you really, it's very easy to ignore one of them, especially, and you really shouldn't do that. So yeah, I've been working out for a while. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like super impressive or anything, but it's pretty important.
It looked like is that some kind of variation of like starting strength or something that you were doing?
I just kind of do whatever. I really hate a lot of people post like criticisms of my workout, like you did too much volume, or you should do this. Shut the fuck up. Like I actually like I fucking just hate that shit. It's like I really hate receiving fitness advice and nutrition advice. I know that's really popular right now, but it's just annoying because it's like I understand there's all these sciences, but I'm in my body. I know what feels good. Just like me posting like a thing on Twitter with like my list for that night isn't an invitation for you to tell me all the latest science it's just me like posting. So please go away if you do that.
That's right.
It's just annoying.
And if I will bring the Twitter bit onto the YouTubes right now, you criticize Charles' workout patterns, schedules, weight, anything like that. You might find one of these two guys right here showing up at your home address. So just watch it. Okay, and yeah, with the spiritual, let's go there for a second. But if you're comfortable with it, of course. But what you're saying about mind, body, and spirit is right in line with sort of what the show is about or is becoming about. And is that something? Is the spiritual something that's been a part of your life from the beginning? Is it something you're getting into now, or do you have anything to say about that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I was like born Catholic and everything, and I went to religious classes, and we weren't like my family wasn't too religious, so that's what I
Catholic.
started out as. Yeah, yeah. And then I went to college and became an atheist, as you do, because I mean, when I was in college, it's like the new atheists were like all the rage. So if you were a smart guy at all, like that's what you were into, was like the Four Horsemen and all that gay shit. So, but then, Jordan Peterson was actually pretty important in terms of like opening me up to having a positive idea of Christianity, but obviously he doesn't produce faith or anything. But about 3 years ago, almost, I did actually, in my head, formally become a Christian again. And now I'm like properly Catholic again. And people have different reasons for choosing a church. Mine is just basically traditional. Like I know a lot of people are into Orthodoxy, but like I view Orthodoxy as just not my cultural heritage. Like I'm Catholic. My family's been Catholic for like I don't know, I guess hundreds of years, right? And that's just what I am. Like I don't really view it as a choice so much as this is just what my people are, as Catholicism. So I started going to church. Actually, the first Sunday after Easter, I started going to church again. And the main instigator was honestly just like I felt like I needed an actual counterbalance to the spiritual warfare happening, in society right now, and I just had to get some sort of positive spiritual influence. So yeah, I go to church every Sunday, do workouts every Monday and Friday. I'm doing jujitsu on Thursdays as well, which is good. And obviously, I read books and nerd stuff. So like, yeah, I'm not. I take the mind, body, spirit thing pretty seriously.
That's great. Yeah. When you did, yeah, man, I would say just for whatever it's worth, man, I think jiu-jitsu might be one or two most important life choices I ever made. I think it may have saved my life when I was like 18, in a very non-dramatically. So, man, that's awesome. When you came across Jordan Peterson, in him bringing you kind of maybe back into the spiritual realm, was the connection for you sort of, you sound like you're obviously a very intellectual guy. Was the connection sort of his approach of where, in sort of an intellectual understanding of what true meant in sort of the wrestling with this idea of God, or did you have it in you to sort of just be a true a true believer, mind, body, and soul, that you sort of believe everything as written?
Really hard to self-reflect like that. I mean, I've never been prior to that really like an ideological anything. I've always just sort of been, just interested in learning, and I was never turned into like a leftist at university. So I was just like a normal person, and then Gamergate happened, and I was like, well, what the hell is all this crazy stuff? Like, I'm not a racist, sexist, homophobe. I just want to play my video games. So things were getting really crazy, and Jordan Peterson was just a guy who was saying sane things. He was a professor who was saying sane things. I watched his whole psychology series, so he didn't really say much about Christianity, really. But I think it's because I took him seriously in his psychology lectures, Maps of Meaning, and just the other things he was saying, that when he started talking more about religion in his biblical lecture series and all that, like I was predisposed to take him seriously more in the same way I took like the New Atheist seriously, right? Like I've always just kind of even when I was even like 2014 and whatnot, before things got political, I would just I would listen to debates. I think like Intelligence Squared is one of the big debate forums. Like I would just listen to debates and just watch documentaries on Netflix and just consume, intellectual content just because, that's what I like doing. So like, yeah, I've just been open to ideas, and I think the best parts of the right are still that way, right? And that's like why on Academics Agents channel, for example, like I'm kind of in that sphere, and everyone in that sphere is kind of like very open to evolving, because like I guess something that defines like me and some amount of other people that I associate with is kind of just our general openness to taking any ideas seriously. So that's kind of how I just ended up going from where I was to where I am so quickly, is because I've never like, I had this tweet the other day that my friend the Prudentialist said was really good, and was like I said the distinguishing factor between like left and right is that when a leftist encounters some like deep cold truth about reality, they recoil from it, and I think people on the right are just interested, and I just find myself interested in ascertaining truth, and I think that's something I'm seeing more and more often on the right these days, and that's a really good phenomenon.
That's a really interesting observation about that left-right distinction. As soon as you said that, I kind of started trying that idea out in my head, and like immediately I connected it to the fact that hierarchy is it's a part of reality. It's actually a reflection of the nature of God, and that's the reaction that leftists have toward hierarchy. They immediately recoil from it. Like all forms of hierarchy are verboten to them, because that's another distinction people have used between right and left, is that obviously right is hierarchy, left is egalitarian. But that I like that idea that right-wing people are looking, like right-wing people want to accept the world for what it is. Like they want to know what the world is so they know how to act within it. Left-wing people want to make the world reflect what's inside them. They're like focused outward, so they're aggressive. Whereas, and this is why right-wing people always wind up being reactive. So that's a really interesting observation. I took the Big Five test, and I scored 100 on openness. And that was at a time when I didn't know really whether I would consider myself left wing or right wing. And that, yeah, Cooper here in the chat, this is something I was trying to reconcile this in my head, that according to that model, I think that lefties are generally really high in openness. Because I remember getting that, scoring a really, really high score in openness and being like, wow, does that mean like, am I a left wing person? And I don't think it translates that directly anymore, but that's I don't know. Do you have anything on that?
Absolutely. I was into those tests when Jordan Peterson was popular, and I took a couple of them, and I took my results are always pretty weird. Like my neuroticism score is 0. and which can
Mine,
actually.
No, I was going to say mine was too. It was really, it was totally zero. That was what my neuroticism score was. So
Yeah, it makes some online interactions weird because people think you're getting mad, but you're not. Like, it's pretty difficult to actually rile me up, which can actually be problematic. Like, in some ways, that's actually an advantage that the left has, right? Is their high neuroticism. And my conscientiousness is 99th percentile, and then my openness is about 70. And I found this is actually be a pretty common pattern among reactionaries. Openness to new ideas, like the typical right winger is high conscientiousness, but not high openness, right? Like reactionaries tend to be high conscientiousness, high openness. That's just sort of a pattern I've noticed. That I'm not like citing any science here, but I have noticed this as well. Like I said, my openness is at about the 70% mark, and I think most people, like if you just consider the typical Christian, they're going to be actually I think a little higher, definitely higher in neuroticism. They're going to be zeroed out. They're going to be lower in openness and also high in conscientiousness. Whereas leftists, of course, are low in conscientiousness. So I think there's probably some scientific studies we could look at on this. Maybe even someone like Dutton or Garapi have gone over them at some point as well. But yeah, I think high openness is really important.
That 30% of Charles that is not open is a hell of a 30% though, because he will call something gay real fast. Which actually brings me to a question. I have to say, I came across you, and I always knew you as the sweet boy who would serenade me mold bug readings while I was falling asleep, and it was obviously fantastic. And then I went to your Twitter, and it was not necessarily what I expected. I saw lots of things. I saw some articles about men, preferring to have sexual intercourse with crazy women, and your quote tweet saying "so all women," and it sort of, I was just taken back. So I just wonder, I wonder, is any of the Twitter stuff like a shtick, or did I just I let these gentle readings go to my head?
I've never done a shtick. I mean, Twitter definitely makes you shitpost more, and generally makes people more vicious. So I wouldn't say Twitter is like my total. It's not all of my personality, but it's some piece of it, right? Just like my video content is another piece of the personality. And I just find it annoying how soft and lame everything is, and we just can't say things anymore. And it's just like I like just dumping my brain contents on the Twitter. And just having fun. I mean, when I'm with the guys, I'm going to go literally like right after this, I'm going to drive to my friend's house, and we're going to pump some iron, and we're going to shit post, and things you're not allowed to say will be said, and we'll just have a good time. Like, normal people who lived at any other time in history. Like, it's just so annoying that how we just have to self-police and just act so lame. Like, I don't know. I enjoy Twitter for just like, it's good to have a good spurg out on Twitter, and just put it all out there.
I agree, and I think Twitter does have a way of amplifying parts of your personality. And again, anyone who's not familiar, I have an ongoing thing where I really toe the line of criminal charges in terms of defending anyone who may or may not even be attacking Charles on Twitter. That's some bit that happened. I don't know how often you can get away. I think I said I didn't at him, but I did say that I would come find Jack. I don't know how for this world my Twitter account is, but that he dare step to Charlemagne in any way might get him a visit. I did want to ask one quick thing. Did you have a video about historical cycles and maybe some idea that they were speeding up?
Yeah, that was just some random stream I did with one of my old buddies from actually, like, we met on the Jordan Peterson server, and we would do like VCs and whatnot, and he had his own channel, so I clipped that out. And yeah, well, it does seem like technology's just made everything go faster, right? I mean, that's not really a novel observation. So we have this concept of historical cycles, and when I talked about that with those chaps on that stream, I don't think I had like read Spengler or anything at that point, but I had read Evola, and I do wonder if these cycles of history are actually accelerating, and you have this idea of cycles within cycles as well. And it's like, are things going to happen before we could even see them coming? I think Nick Land has interesting things to say on this and the idea of acceleration. Like, it seems to the point almost where by the time you notice things are happening, especially in the technological realm, it's too late to even react to them. Like our technocracy is progressing faster than we can react, because by the time we even observe it, it's already happened. I don't know. It's a weird idea space, and I need to read more Nick Land, to be honest.
We have someone who's I was hoping that he would be here, but Nicholas in the chat really explores this idea, and I was wondering how kind of broad that idea is, and if some of the terminology that Nicholas throws around is like a common parlance for people who are exploring this idea or what. So what was it? The word that he uses is feedism all the time, right?
Yeah, feedism.
Is that feed with a D or like feet?
With a D, like FEED. Yeah, feedism. And he's in the chat right now. He'll get us caught up with a quick definition here. He just said historical liquidationism is where it's at. He's been talking about kind of this effect, and that we're like accelerating toward a point where the individual as a concept will disappear altogether. So he talks about the dividual, which is a term I never heard before, and I actually don't even know what it means. So it's kind of exactly what he's talking about here, where it's like the narrowing in the response time between seeing something and then reacting to it, or something like that, and that we're moving toward a point where the very conception that defines like property rights for a libertarian world altogether is going to disappear from society. Like, if you don't have a conception of the individual, then like the whole libertarian conception of property rights falls apart altogether.
Yeah, no one can really deny at this point that the whole idea of the individual is virtually irrelevant. I mean, there's just no respect at this point. Barely even like lip service is paid to the idea of the individual having right to refuse the medicine or pretty much anything else. But it's a perverse reversion in that we're sort of undoing this individualism, but going not into like this cooperative organic structure, but in this top-down leftist control structure that's against all natural hierarchy. I mean, this kind of ties into Nick Land again. Like, I think people, and I've tried to do this on my channel, but people really do not understand accelerationism in the Landian sense. I think they think of like Uncle Ted and stuff when they think of acceleration. That's not really what he is talking about. Like, I think acceleration is the idea that the technocracy sort of outpaces itself and collapses into itself because it's no longer able to exact control over its mechanisms, because they transcend beyond like the brain power of humans to operate them. We might see this happen with the current regime. Like, if you look at Kamala Harris, like, she's obviously just an idiot, right? It's weird. Like, someone brought this up the other day. It's like, you basically just have these a lot of the elites are just complete idiots, but they're just they have their hands on the lever of power, right? And don't get me wrong, several of them at least, probably hundreds, are extremely intelligent, extremely dangerous. But you see more and more just this like devolution happen, where you have just these utter imbeciles ruling over you, and it really it feels bad, man, but it also is sort of an advantage, because like if this IQ decline affects them as well. And Ed Dutton has pointed out that the elites aren't like separate from us, strictly speaking. Like, they're simply not going to be able to control their technocracy anymore. And this is where like localism comes in, because it's much easier to control smaller domains, and if you're of above average intelligence, you're actually going to be able to do that effectively. So that's part of why I'm optimistic in some sense. I wouldn't call myself an optimist. So you asked that earlier. Like, I wouldn't call myself optimistic, but if you detect any optimism, it is in that there's some reason to believe like we have a path out of this, even though it's probably going to get pretty ugly. But I do think if you look at the decline and collapse of great civilizations, like the bad parts mostly occur for the people who are in the urban areas. But for the rural person, and obviously ancient Rome is a good example of this. Like unless an invading army specifically comes and takes your crops and loots you and kills you, like you're probably not really going to notice the fall of Rome and the shifting of control over Italy to the Visigoths. I mean, if you're just like a farmer, you're just farming, unless someone comes to bother you, I mean, you're kind of just not going to notice. Like the cities can just go into decay. And, if you sort of choose now to go into this lower lifestyle, lower level of civilization, I guess, and get more local and more self-sustaining, like you're going to take a hit in terms of like level of civilization. But over the next century, like you and your descendants probably won't really notice things decaying around you, unless you get really unlucky. Some people will. But I think that's partly why I would say I'm optimistic in a sense, because there does seem to be a track to exit the system and just sort of live outside of it. Because for all the crazy stuff that happens, like if you're just out in the middle of nowhere in Montana, like what does it really matter, all the stuff going on? And we actually do have all these great technologies available, like solar panels and whatnot, that can allow you to, operate your own homestead pretty easily. So, I'm still optimistic about that.
The only way that they're
my fear for that is that technology is going to make sort of the blast radius more expansive, but my hope is that it can still be escapable in some sense. And with that technology, in addition to putting yourself sort of in a more remote rural area and kind of taking things into, sort of downgrading your lifestyle and things like that, one thing that you can do with your technology is find a group of digital entrepreneurs to help you in your journey navigating this crazy new world that we find ourselves in. And what I'm talking about, of course, is the Nomad Network, Jason Stapleton's Nomad Network. And if you want to explore the great many resources that are waiting for you there, you can go to
www.nomadnetwork.app/king
is where you would go for that. Because yes, you need to learn how to raise chickens. There's probably somewhere in there that knows how to raise chickens, right? There's a lot of resources for that. But I'm just going to come out and say it right there. I'm not going to name drop them unless I can. But just talking for fucking 15 minutes with one of the guys on the Nomad Network, he set me up with like a business plan that, again, not to be dramatic, absolutely changed the direction of my near-term life and maybe long-term life. I couldn't tell you, but there's a lot of resources in there, information, people, and if you're listening to this and you don't have a real great plan of going forward, we're talking about some pretty fucking gnarly things right here. So if you're in the mind space that things might get that crazy, I would sincerely go check out the Nomad Network, because I have, and you can do that by nomadnetwork.com.
No.
.app. Nomadnetwork.app.
You have to do the www.nomadnetwork.app/king.
Pedophile? You don't put in www? Of course you would put in www.
Yes. www.nomadnetwork.app/king. This has been kind of, we're really getting into where my mind has been for a while now, because as I'm trying to understand the system, trying to figure out it's like I'm trying to find the outlines of the regime so that I can fully appreciate what's in front of me and understand how to relate to it. And it's like, is it something that you want to try to take on, or is it something that you just recognize it's like, I'm not equipped to battle this boss right now, so I need to go acquire some more skills, acquire some more assets, income, whatever it is, and then put myself in a position where I can do battle. And then at that point, I have the decision. Is it worth doing battle now? Or are we at the point where you're better off just starting to paddle your lifeboat away from the ship as it starts sinking? Because I think the only way that they're going to be able to retain the sort of globalized totalitarian system they're creating is ultimately they're going to have to make it a closed system. And that's what that's like explicitly what they're doing. They're creating a dividing line where you either check into the system and submit your entire sovereignty explicitly over to them, or you're completely cut off and you're outside the walls of the city. You're on your own, and there's a good chance that packs of roving hunters will come after you and raid your camp every so often.
And in all the World Economic Forum fan fiction, that is exactly what there is like a group of outsiders, which I think is becoming more and clear who that's going to be.
Like some kind of maybe like a remnant. And so that's like that's kind of, I guess, our mindset here. Where do you put yourself on like, I guess, on which side of that dichotomy would you see yourself in we can still try to take it on, or do we just need to start making ourselves self-sufficient from it?
Yeah, there's always the possibility of some sort of like miraculous restoration, I guess. But I think both of these paths kind of converge right now because you need resources for either. I mean, I think what they're trying to do is with this cutoff, they're trying to hope that the people they cut off just sort of peter out and die and don't build some alternative that's self-sustaining. And that's what we need to be doing, is building an alternative civilization alongside this thing. And depending on the condition of the American government by the time we actually have anything, maybe then you can use political power to wrest the thing away from the elites, or maybe the thing collapses. So I think that's just too far in the future to really think of. I think righties often come up with these like big ideas of what they're going to do, but it's like at this point we need to be we're at square one here. We need elites, billionaires to give us money. We don't even have organizations for them to give money to. There's a lot of drama about who Peter Thiel is paying. Like, I want Peter Thiel to pay me. I want him to pay whoever, right? Because we need a lot of money. I look at these political campaigns for some of these allegedly based Republicans, and they just get hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like, we could do so much with that money. So we need institutions, around academic agent. There's sort of this network, informal network. I'm hoping that network formalizes into multiple different branches at some point, right? Like, that's the goal. Is all of our, there's these multiple spheres. Like, you guys have a sphere, I'm in a sphere. There's this sphere with people like Keith Woods and Joel Davis and Imperium Cast in it. Like, all of these collectives need to like formalize themselves and construct actual institutions in whatever domain they happen to be in. It could be intellectual. Your nomad guy you mentioned, that's another type of institution. We need that, and we need sustainable places to live. So that's why I think if you're not doing homesteading at this point, it's like, what are you even doing? People always talk about getting out of the cities, but like, no, really, get out of the city. Because I think a lot of my friends don't understand this either. Like, I don't think they really believe that civilization can decline. Kind of like we're all born into inflation, and we just kind of take it as a given. Even my best friend who I'm moving with, I mean, literally today, we finally are in a position to where the group of guys I'm moving with, we might be making an offer on a bunch of land that we're all going to go homestead on. And I'm probably going to just turn my channel into a homesteading channel after I do that, because we're just going to be building our own homestead, basically.
That made me. Are you, just because you're talking about these people, are you familiar with, or maybe you've even talked to them before, but the Unists?
No, I don't know them at all.
Okay, so he was shit. He was the guy who just for recreation, when I wanted an audiobook of the Ted Kaczynski's open letter to that newspaper. I found an audiobook, and it was by the Unists. And basically, that's what he's done. He had all these philosophical, spiritual, really kind of like edited in like Windows 95 like really cool videos. Someone in this, there's 100 people in here. Someone in there knows the Eunice. I'm sure.
I've listened to several of the videos.
I think he's gone full homesteading as of like a year or two ago, but it's just a really similar sort of path. And I always wondered if you two had ever kind of like bumped into each other digitally or whatever.
No, I mean, my project's kind of just random. Like one of my friends decided, he was getting the hell out of here. And then my best friend was like, oh, we've been thinking about doing that too. And I was like, oh, actually, I've also been secretly thinking of, getting the hell out of here and just, buying a farm basically and living rurally. So we decided to just cooperate together. And that's not a position most people are in. But like seriously, if you're anywhere, like suburbs count as city too. Like if you don't have enough land to self-sustain, you're just doing it wrong. Like people ask me what to do, and it really is very simple. Like you need to get the hell out of the cities, and you need to you need to find a group of people you can trust. And if several middle class people come together, the amount of resources you can leverage is kind of nuts, because the system's designed to keep individual middle class people from doing anything. But if you just get like 3 people who make a reasonable amount of money, you can buy a crazy amount of land in some states and do whatever you want with it, right? Like that's where we need to be going. I mean, this stuff is not complicated, and most people just aren't thinking on these like ground level steps. Like they want to hear these grandiose political ideologies, and we're just not at that point. So we need to first be building up. We need to be able to survive, right? Like at this point, it looks like they're trying to just cut us off from the economy. So you need to be able to survive first. And then once you have that, then we can start building off of that. So I think sort of no matter which path you're on, it's like, well, we need to actually take our position seriously. Like we have no power or resources whatsoever. So how are we going to do anything? It doesn't make any sense.
And with that, Pete's, idea of sort of trying to take over very small, red, rural, same difference for now, areas. Oh God, that's terrifying too. Because I really do see a lot of, people fleeing the cities, kind of fucking things up. But yeah, I hope not. But yeah, that like sort of Pete's approach with that, and sort of in Andrew's plan, I think those are all really good things for people to check out, because I think some of those smaller areas are really available to, take that kind of action.
Definitely check out the GOP Mises Caucus, because that's like their stated goal. The guys we read the ad for earlier, like their stated goal is to go into red rural areas, local governments, and basically implement Hoppa's what must be done strategy.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. The GOP Mises Caucus seems good, because like local politics are actually pretty important, because we need to protect any of these areas that we can actually build politically and legally. And like part of the reason
to be the focus too, protection. Like starting with, we're playing defense, we're protecting our people, not we're trying to evangelize the world, or we're trying to take over the system or anything like that. It's like you have to start with protecting your own neighborhoods, and if you start from that perspective, I think that really reframes the approach that seems to make the most sense.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure like any of us are actually capable of taking action against the system in any way that, like, the people alive today just don't hold a candle to the type of people who lived hundreds of years ago. Part of the reason I'm moving far north is because the climate is harsher, and just like I read Evola because I felt like I wasn't intellectually like taking radical enough steps. I feel like I need to be in a harsh climate, and I want to raise children in a harsh climate, so that they have to, like they're going to be better than me, right? I mean, they're going to know what it is to have to go through some sort of strife to even survive. That's the idea, right? I mean, people talk about, oh, you just need to have kids and propagate your views. It's like we need to create people. We need to create aristocrats. We need to create people the likes of which haven't been seen on this world for hundreds of years, right? And you need to know how to do that. I need to be prepared to do that. And those people probably won't even be detached enough from modernity to actually become a new elite class. Like, it seems like people just really haven't grasped
It's
the
a
scale.
multi-generational, yeah.
Yeah, this is a multi-generational project, and you can't be raising your children in the cities. You can't be having them have access to modern technology and all this stuff. I mean, we need to recreate the type of person produced in the old world consciously, so that we can have the power level necessary to build a new elite class.
That's, I think, one of the biggest disconnects where, when people started, when there was some kind of like feud or whatever, with this whole post-libertarianism word, which isn't a real thing. I think one of the biggest disconnects is that it seems a lot of libertarians do not agree on the scale of the problem.
Yes.
And do not, and kind of just anticipate that even if their efforts do not achieve anything, well, at least they tried. And just the idea that their efforts could make something just so much worse, is totally foreign to them. And like just the range of potential outcomes, they're just so much more optimistic. I don't think that they have a grasp on the time scale, like you said, or the severity of what it could be. And I think, that's really where this whole breakdown in terms of, people kind of commenting on post-libertarianism, which again doesn't exist, much like, by the way, I saw that at some point you said that neo-reactionaries made a mistake by going by that label.
Oh, absolutely.
And for the first, it was hilarious because for the first, 60 shows that we did, I had a disclaimer where anytime we talked about like Moldbugian ideas, where I said, just so everybody knows, there's nothing neo, there's nothing reactionary, and certainly nothing neo-reaction. It's just like, those are just words that I just don't want anywhere fucking near me, like on the internet at all. But yeah, the post-libertarian thing doesn't exist either. But yeah, I don't know what people would need to see in terms of being woken up, to steal a term that like this is not for play. Like this is like real shit that is kind of like staring us in the face. And I don't know if it's Disney movies or bicycle helmets that are to blame, but just the idea that things can't just go fucking sideways seems to be just like a foreign concept to people.
I'm sitting here looking at this like, is this the end of the world? Like, is this the time that's been forecasted for millennia by all kinds of different cultures? Are we at that point? Like, that's the magnitude that I have for it. So then for other people,
end of the world.
yeah. It's interesting. We were talking about the individual earlier, and the modern the modern regime is there's this weird paradox where on one hand they're like explicitly hostile to the actual practice of any sort of individualism, and the idea just doesn't even occur to them. Yet at the same time, their entire worldview is built around the conception of the individual. But it's the way I've referred to it on the show here in the past is like it's like the archetype of the individual. Whenever anybody, you hear this in libertarians too, whenever anybody sits and talks about any sort of policy thing, unless they are some sort of a dissident right-wing thinker, you hear them talking about this as in like they abstract away from the conversation and they imagine a hypothetical individual and they run through simulations of how that hypothetical individual would act in that hypothetical situation. And then they bring that back to the world and they start acting as if that thing they played in their head is in the actual world. And so what they've done is, this was the consequence of the Enlightenment, is it basically took Christianity, Protestant Christianity, reformed God out of the center of it and placed this archetypical hypothetical individual there. So it's actually all the whole school of liberalism and democracy and capitalism and communism and libertarianism and all these isms within the school of liberalism is quite literally self-worship masquerading as Christianity. And what that's done now is it's built up a regime that has basically all the facets of an antichrist that is now moving itself into position to be like the church. Like we are all you need. This is we're the representation of you. We're the full realization of democracy. It's all it's all built around worship for the individual. So then when you're looking at your own practices and how you're behaving, if you're engaged in a practice of self-worship of any kind, you're actually feeding into the spirit of the regime. And this is what's so damaging and so harmful about degeneracy of all forms. Not just sexual degeneracy, but all forms of moral degeneracy. They feed into the spirit of the regime, because the regime, it's kind of like it lives in the hypothetical individual of all these people. That's why they're NPCs. They're running around all possessed by this hypothetical individual that's playing out in this movie in their head.
Yeah, I agree with that big time. I mean, I think pretty much everything I do now has to be framed in the idea of like, how is this good for European American civilization, like in terms of my political project, not really for me. Because if it was just me, there are plenty of moves I could make that would just make me comfy to sit out the decline, right? But like, I need to be doing things that are going to preserve my civilization. Like I have to put all of my interests second to the interest of the civilization that I live in first, right? So yeah, I mean, people are stuck thinking like individuals, but this is a big problem with like libertarian thought in general, right? Is it's all about the individual.
Yes.
But the individual is just about to be destroyed. I mean, it seems like human beings are about to be destroyed. Like it's hard for me. If I wasn't a Christian, I would say these people don't even have souls, right? I look around me and it's like being in that movie They Live, or what is the other one with the pointing guy? And it's like a gift from it where aliens like replicate people and they pretend to be them, right? I forget the name of the movie.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Yes, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's like I go outside and I feel like these aren't even human beings around me. Like I don't know what these things are, but they're not even human. Like I'm scared of them. I would be less scared of the literal Terminator, right? Because at least like it's not, I don't know. It's almost like this uncanny valley feeling. But it's like I don't want to be around these things. I don't know what they are, but I have to get away from them, right?
Are you familiar with the term egregore?
No.
So when I heard this concept, I now look back on my life as the time before I heard of an egregore and the time after. Like it was completely transformative to how I viewed the world, and it transformed the way that I viewed Christianity as well. So an egregore is an occult concept representing a distinct non-physical entity that arises from a collective group of people. As soon as I heard that definition, I understood exactly what it was, and it snapped into complete clarity for me. That this is when people talk about demon possession, they talk about powers and principalities and angels and demons. Like people, even Jung observed this when he said that people don't have ideas, ideas have people. He's saying that literally, that ideas are non-physical entities that possess people, and they operate those people as essentially as NPCs. They're NPCs who are programmed. I was just watching your video on the Matrix that you did just recently, and that's that's what the programs are. They're the people who have been possessed by this spirit. And so then to make the analogy over to Christianity, then like that's what the body of Christ is. The body of Christ is a non-physical entity that possesses a group of people. You become actually the body of Christ in that sense. That totally like flipped my world on its head when that clicked. And I think that's probably what you're experiencing then. When you're encountering those people, you recognize that they're operating according to a script. You recognize that you're not interacting with that person. You're interacting with the spirit that's animating that person.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I've brought up the Wikipedia page for this word, and I'll have to look more into it. Yeah, it does describe my experience fairly well, and I'm not trying to be like mean or vicious towards the normies here. It's just like it's just what I feel, right? Like I have this concept of what it is to be a human being, and I look at these people we call NPCs, and I'm like, you don't seem to have like your own thought process. You don't seem to be like a being. You seem to just be, like you said, this scripted entity, and it's a scary. It's scary to be around, I guess, just like creatures, right? Because I understand what a human is, and I understand how to interact with a human, but like, what are you? I don't understand this program that all these programs that are just walking around, right? That's part of the reason why I want to be outside of the city, because it feels like they're just these, I'm surrounded by these like invisible metaphysical entities that I don't understand, and it's just utterly terrifying on like a deep spiritual level. So yeah, this idea you put forward is pretty interesting.
I think the scary part is that like most people are susceptible to that. Mm-hmm. It's very rare that you would find someone who is even under the notion that they would like think for themselves. And so
this whole idea of thinking for yourselves is interesting, because it's like I question like why I am like this. Like, is there something metaphysical going on that I view myself as someone, thinking for myself, or is it just luck? I mean, I don't know. I would like to know, because it would help me be less afraid, because I don't know how to not be hurt by the NPCs. And we see the state trying to get them to hurt us now because of the medicine. And I want to avoid harm if possible, right? Because that's just natural. And I don't fully understand how to actually do that other than just not interact with them at all.
Yeah, that's and so you're in like a urban area, right?
Suburban.
Suburban. Yeah. Is pretty woke where you are, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, it's mixed, right? It's on and off, but there's plenty of woke people in here.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's kind of funny. When I split this bottle of wine right here with Curtis Yarvin, what he mentioned was that the common thread of people that he was meeting with and like why he found the discussions like tolerable to meet with like that many people is that the people that seem to be like drawn to him or whatever were capable of like thinking for themselves, whatever that means. I don't know. I'm not convinced that anyone can particularly think for themselves, but I get the idea. I don't.
Yeah, I don't even like the phrasing it as thinking for yourself, because whatever's differentiating us from them seems much more metaphysical than just this idea of thinking. I don't know what it is, but
I have a theory, and it might be as I say it might start sounding really, really arrogant, and I don't mean for it to be that way, but
pumpkin.
So I had a little flash of insight this afternoon in the shower, and it happens from time to time, and I have to hop out and I have to tweet it out, or I have to write it out as fast as possible. And this time I just happened to tweet it, and so I said, life must be experienced before it can be understood. And so experience and understanding are discrete modes of human cognition. You could even call them subcognition and cognition. What's become clear to me is that what we call thought occurs at the subcognitive level. So thought is part of experience. You experience your thoughts, and then our thoughts reflect our environment. Our environment is both physical and spiritual. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with applies to ideas as much as, or maybe more than, people. And those who seek to psychologically condition people are engaged in spiritual warfare targeted at changing who those people are spiritually in order to change who they are physically. So I think like if you ever listen to anybody talking about like getting an idea, like what do we say? We say getting an idea. It's like a something that just appears, like it comes to us. People say this, that there's different things you can do that will make stuff pop into your head, but we don't actually know where it's from. And I think it was it Aldous Huxley who said that consciousness is like that our minds are like receivers, and consciousness is like a field or like a wave that we have the capacity to receive. My theory, with taking those things into consideration, my theory would be that thinking for yourself is actually not possible. That it's actually not physically possible. What you can do is you can influence the thoughts that you pick up, that you take in from elsewhere. And so for us, this is the part where it may start sounding arrogant, but ultimately God is the truth. So the closer you get to the truth, the closer you get to God. And so then the Holy Spirit would be the spirit that draws you to the truth. There's one spirit that draws you to the truth. So if we're feeling ourselves departed from them, and it seems like they are in sin, they're missing the mark, literally speaking, they're in sin. So they are possessed by a different spirit. And what we're picking up on is that we're possessed by the spirit that's drawing us toward the truth, and they're possessed by a spirit that's taking them away from it.
Yeah, I like this a lot. It reminds me of a lot of the things Jordan Peterson used to say. And I mean, part of the reason I managed to reconvert to Christianity is because, like, I felt that the more I attempted to align myself with truth, the more in line with Christ I felt.
Yes.
And as like
Same.
I continue along this path, it's like this uh this relationship between the two, where the more you get in line with either, the more you get in line with the other. And I like this phrasing a lot, and it definitely it's definitely true. Like, you don't really think. I mean, I've done yoga and meditation, right? And like, if you do that at all, even for a few minutes, you'll understand that you don't really think most of your thoughts. They just sort of pop into your head. You can, to some extent, like, think about a particular problem consciously. So there's some sense in which you can choose to think about something, but you don't ever choose the particular thoughts. And yeah, this idea of being almost like a radio antenna for the Holy Spirit is pretty interesting. It does make me think that the normie, which according to doctrine should be possible, right? The normie can be saved if they actually attune themselves with the Holy Spirit. So I like this explanation. It seems very powerful.
So they have to be they are there has to be something that gets their attention, that redirects their attention, that they are perhaps the Holy Spirit influences them to finally get their attention over to something else. There has to be that other thing there. And so that's why Christians are called to be imagers of God, to image him, so that when the person's consciousness flickers and they see something come across their view, there's something there that can attach them to this new icon, this new archetype. And this is getting back to what you said about the basically the kind of the libertarian scene. There's a distinct lack of strong masculine leadership. And this is across the whole right wing, I'd say, in general. Ultimately, strong masculine leadership is a manifestation of the nature of Christ. And if there are not people who are embodying that, if there aren't men who are stepping into positions of leadership and responsibility and taking on the role of king with all of the responsibility that comes with it, then the NPCs don't have an icon to redirect their gaze. This ultimately is what the whole hierarchy of heaven is all built on. One level of the hierarchy imaging Christ all the way up to God at the top. And so, yeah, I guess those are more thoughts that came as we were thinking about this.
Pretty interesting. I think that's very true. This is, I guess, a strategy I employ around my friends. I guess all but one of which are atheists, and like, I don't actively proselytize to them, but it's like it's known that I'm a Christian, and I sort of I guess I promote it in the sense of embodying it, right? And I think this is a lot more important to be sort of that beacon for the Holy Spirit than to like Bible bash, as people would say. I don't really think that's an effective strategy. Even I think most Christians would admit that's not really effective. It wouldn't have been effective on them. But simply like embodying the Christian way of being is really the best advertisement for Christianity, because I guess people aren't stupid. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'll just say people aren't stupid. And if they're around you enough and they see you behaving a certain way and they sort of connect the dots to what's going on, maybe they might be able to direct their attention away from all the psychological warfare happening. That's a large part of the whole technological Twitter sphere. It's all just like distractions, pointing you at everything but Christ. Like, that's the whole spiritual warfare aspect, the info war of the elites, right? And like, if you can offer any one thing that will allow them to look away from it, that has a lot of potential.
I'm very interested to, like, if I could get into a time machine and travel back into time, the one thing that I would want to know the most is what would the reaction be of someone from, I don't know, 100, 200, say 500 years ago, if they came and saw us today physically, like our actual physical appearances. I think that we are, even healthy people today, I think are diseased compared to people back then, given everything that's been done to the water, to the air, to like just every time you take a shower, unless you're in a really rural area, somewhere, or you're on your own well or something, every time you take water, or every time you take a bath and cover yourself in water, you're being just drowned in hormones and chemicals, and your skin is an organ. So you're just drowning your largest organ in toxicity.
Well,
This,
your
that
largest
whole,
organ.
What's that?
Your largest organ. Speak
Oh
for yourself.
yeah, yeah, I know. So
you guys are going to get into fluoride making the frogs gay right when I have to leave. That is so. I can't tell you how frustrating that is. It was weird. I was walking around today, and I like a lot of what Matthew just said was going through my mind with regards to the idea of objective truth, in sort of in how it kind of like reconciles with like the, you know, like we say here all the time, if you live something out, it becomes true, like as well. And so, you know, this kind of this like sort of placebo idea, which is why this is also confusing, is that, you know, the people who have been possessed by whatever the spirit is that you want to call that is, you know, possessing a lot of people currently, they believe that heart and soul, you know, as vehemently as like any. I'm also in the South, by the way, Charles. I'm in like research. No, well, I'm outside of Research Triangle area, but in North Carolina. But just as vehemently as any Christian believes what they believe, and so to them, when they're living it out, I think they see the effects of it becoming true, and especially if they're in this insulated world of like academia. And if you've ever like talked to somebody who's only existed there, it's like just a totally different planet if you take them outside of that and anything that resembles the real world. But meanwhile, there is this like objective truth that you can attune to with, you know, what Matthew was saying. But you're dealing with people who are just as convinced that you are, that what they believe in is the truth. And the only thing, especially if they've been insulated until they're 35, you know, and just like a college campus somewhere, like the only feedback that they have received is that's positive, that in fact, yes, you have the one true truth. But yeah, that was really sort of eye-opening to listen to Matthew, my sweet Matthew. Reminds me of why I told him that he should have a podcast. But I want to go. I want to say thank you so much to Charlemagne for the weirdest guest booking ever on King Tilt. It started off with Charlemagne liking a post about. I've been fascinated with Charlemagne for the longest time, but him liking a post about the dangers of circumcision, I believe, and he's sort of making some inquiries that you know, you'd have to be pretty high in openness to answer. If he was 100% open, after he was answered publicly. I'm here to say, Charles, I don't know what your issue with circumcision is, but I'm one of the good guys. If you know what I'm saying. So I'm gonna get out of here, and I'm gonna let you guys enjoy. And man, thanks to everybody who also joined in the audience. I hope you enjoyed King Phil. It'll probably go on for another 9 hours now. All
right. He's a peach. Do you have another minute?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to highlight something up here that Andrew said. Where'd it go? He said, I highlighted it for a minute. He said the absence of possession by the Holy Spirit is de facto demonic possession. And I think that's the takeaway from this concept that we're playing around with. And so what we're experiencing now is essentially a mass demon possession. And I think that's becoming more and more clear. And so there's a degree to which the more that people begin to engage with the world as it is, the closer that we all come to truth. I think that you're going to get two effects of that. I think on one hand, it's like the God's presence is both life to the blessed and it's death to the cursed. So it's a consuming fire. So I think that you're going to see as people begin to see the world for what it is more and more, you're going to get a really sharp dichotomy being created between the people who are just hopelessly wrapped up with the possession, and with the people who have the capacity to be pulled from it as they the scales fall from their eyes. What's interesting is that the way the Bible talks about Antichrist, which, and I believe that Antichrist is an archetype, that there's a spirit of Antichrist. There are many instantiations of Antichrist. And then perhaps there will be the archetypical Antichrist. I don't know, but it's the Bible says that the Antichrist will ultimately deceive even the very elect.
Mhm.
And so my suspicion then, as I've thought about this, I've been like, if I was the regime, like say I was the one, I was the Dr. Evil sitting up there running the machine that is the regime, I would want to, for the sake of my own self-preservation, I would want to return to some sort of semblance of stability as quickly as possible. And I guess there's two different ways you can approach that. Number one, you can eliminate all of the people who compromise, who create instability. Or on the other hand, you can begin to try to counterbalance. You've tipped everything way over one way. You can kind of counterbalance it by going back the other way. And my suspicion or concern or whatever is that there's going to be a rise of some type of a movement that is pushing back against the excesses of the current regime and positioning or framing itself as the maybe even in explicit terms as the return of Christianity and like the rise of true Christian leadership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yet that itself will be ultimately another manifestation of Antichrist, basically just stepping its own game up. Does that resonate with you at all? And if so, what do you see as what would we be looking out for? How would we want to avoid something like that? How would we want to avoid being enthralled by a new manifestation of Antichrist that appeals to our sentiments rather than others?
Yeah, this is something I have to grapple with a lot as a Catholic, considering the state of the Catholic Church. I just saw the Pope today, or I saw an article about him talking about how, the moral thing to do is to take the medicine, and he doesn't understand why people would not choose to do that because it's the moral thing to do. And it's like, I just see this spirit of Antichrist all over the place now, even in the church. And I do think Antichrist is an archetype, not necessarily a person, although there could be a person at some point, maybe. I mean, obviously, I don't know. But I try to avoid Antichrist-looking things, people who seem to embody the spirit of the Antichrist. Just as you can act Christ-like, you can act Antichrist-like, right, as a corollary. So there is something to that. You also mentioned that, or I saw you had up like absence of God is de facto demonic possession. I mean, my priest in church just this Sunday was talking about how, the idea of hell, like get rid of the idea of like eternal hellfire and just think about being just locked in a box by yourself, detached from everything for eternity, right? And that's hell, right? And like that's how hell is normally defined as it's the absence of God, and in the absence of God, it is the influence of demonic forces will be at work instead. So how to avoid? I guess just don't be tricked by the. We actually went over something like this in the Carlisle stream I just did with Academic Agent, where there's like two types of I can't remember if he called it the valet or not, but don't be tricked by some authority having like the trappings of Christ, like the current Pope and Catholic Church does. Just because it looks like it's this king in Carlisle's terms, or it's one of the good guys, doesn't mean it is. Just because it's wearing the papal robes does not mean that this guy is a representative of what you think he is, right? Like ultimately, it has to be God's will that the current papacy is what it is. But in terms of what it means, particularly, I think we have to be a bit more careful than that. So that's what I would say in terms of avoiding these antichrist forces is just don't be deceived by things taking on the appearance of God when they actually aren't.
That's good. That's good. Do you see that as I guess sort of maybe like the scenario that I have envisioned is some kind of uh some kind of movement that is directed at that? Like JD Vance has kind of like gotten my eye because of this, but he seems like he's just kind of more pathetic than I thought he was. But he strikes me as the type who is kind of the wolf in sheep's clothing that is going to try to appeal to the down home Christian sentiment and manifest as like a strong, right wing powerful force, sort of trying to embody that archetype that Trump kind of embodied as well, of the right wing strongman. Like what I'm anticipating is some kind of a movement arising that starts where people really start like latching onto it and saying like, look, here it is. Here's our Octavian, here's the guy we've been waiting for. Here's the chosen one. And it from the outside, he looks like, his platform is explicitly like anti-woke, and he's all about, bringing maybe something like the adults taking over, and he like runs specifically against all of the corruption and the incompetence and the sickness of the people in the regime, but ultimately is, he's just a different manifestation. Like Moldbug said, he said, if you wind up with fascism, you did it wrong. Do you see something like that coming? Something that's everyone's sitting around waiting for their strongman to throw their support behind. And do you see the regime functioning on a level that deep where they put out like a fake strongman that deceives a lot of people?
No, that's really difficult to answer. Theoretical, counterfactual.
Yeah.
I don't really. It's hard to imagine a strong man emerging without a strong people. So, again, this is why the Trump not revolution failed, because there was just nothing actually behind it. Moldbug wrote this cool article, or he titled it "Epitaph for Pure Wind," right? Which is ultimately everything that the MAGA movement was. I do see people sort of, I think populists are kind of falling for people attempting to inflate their sails on the remaining like MAGA energy with some of these like America First candidates. I doubt we will see anyone on the right emerge into a position like this, but I mean, we should acknowledge that it's happened before, and there are plenty of terrible right-wing figures in history that we do want to avoid. So, it is a danger that there could be a leader like this that we ultimately go all in behind and get deceived by, but I don't really think that is the way the regime. I just don't see someone like that emerging. It almost feels like wishful thinking to even imagine that this could happen. I think the Antichrist seems to operate much more subversively. Well, I guess you could argue that's even more subversive. I don't know. I don't really see it happening though. I don't see the right wing strongman being the main danger at this point.
That's kind of
maybe in another 20 years we could see it happening.
Yeah, there's the debate between whether the regime is, are they genuinely a cabal of Machiavellians who have masterfully schemed themselves to this point, or are they so incompetent that they actually bumble their way into power because people can't believe that they would be so incompetent? And so if it's the former, then if there's actually like a cabal of Machiavellians, I mean, there are people who are explicitly communing with demons. And this is where you get the whole Jeffrey Epstein and everything. There are people who are explicitly taking instructions. I think that's pretty clear. It's pretty obvious that there are people doing that. But the degree to which they could actually, I'm foreseeing that the regime is going to get itself overextended relatively shortly, and the danger is just going to be kind of getting caught in it lashing out. Which is why I would say don't do anything that involves attacking it on its face. Don't give it any reason to come after you. There's not like that martyrdom is not, this isn't a place for martyrdom. You're not going to get, that's not going to accomplish anything for you.
Yeah, I think extremely intelligent and Machiavellian people created what we have now, and there are still plenty of those around. But I think, as the elite decline, they'll be less able to operate very effectively, and there's kind of no reason to. And they will start lashing out more. I mean, you kind of see this right now with the intelligence agencies and all the nonsense that's happened since January 6th. I think to a large extent they are just lashing out, but. And there's just no reason to get caught up in that by poking it in the eye. But there definitely are serious Machiavellian actors who know exactly what they are doing behind this. I mean, obviously, Tony Blair is one such person. Bill Gates is one such person. I mean, he knows exactly what he's doing. And, I think these people certainly believe in their project, right? I mean, these people believe they're perfecting humanity, right? They're not just sitting there twiddling their thumbs thinking about how evil there are. Someone earlier in the chat said, Satan thinks he's the good guy. Like, yeah. I mean, these guys think they're the good guy. They think they're rebelling against the tyranny of heaven. Morgoth's Review just put out this really good video on Paradise Lost that sort of goes over this. I started
that one.
Yeah, so they know what they're doing. I mean, people like Kamala Harris maybe just be like low level, power lusters, but the real Machiavellians behind what's happening, absolutely know what they are doing and are in control. And, ultimately those people are going to dwindle, but I think they're clearly still in power right now.
Yeah. So I guess then my not to beat a dead horse, but my theory would be they would eventually, those types of people who are not necessarily ideologically inclined, apart from having sold their souls to Satan, they would basically remove all their support from the existing left side of the equation and find themselves some would-be strong man and fund him. But I mean, this sort of thing is it's just mental masturbation, really, just for the sake of my own entertainment.
Yeah.
One, I guess. So the last question I'll ask you: you saw today that Steve Bannon was taken into custody?
I heard something about it, but I've been watching the Rittenhouse stuff. So what happened with Steve Bannon?
So apparently I think it was a grand jury. There was a federal warrant issued for his arrest for contempt of Congress. So apparently they're actually prosecuting contempt of Congress now. When I saw the first little blip on this on Disclose.tv a couple days ago, it surprised me that nobody was talking about it, because I was like, this is like, I think this is one of the most significant developments or significant escalations in a while. And this to me strikes, this is the regime now going into explicit political persecution mode, and we don't care if it looks like political persecution. We're just going to do it because we can. And I feel like this is about to start something. And I don't know if I'm just not seeing something, or if I'm seeing something other people aren't. I don't know, but I don't see a lot of people who are really recognizing this as that big of a deal. What do you think?
Yeah, it probably has to do with the Rittenhouse trial. I mean, maybe they tactically did it while that was happening. Same thing with Project Veritas, right? Yep. So yeah, I think these two events combined this is extremely concerning. We'll have to see what happens with Bannon. I mean, just being taken and just having any interaction like that where you're being arrested is a very bad sign. Yeah, we're definitely entering a phase of political persecution openly, just completely brazen and open, and they're going after the big targets first, and it's going to trickle down eventually to people at a lower level, right? And you don't want to fall under that microscope at all. So it's very important that like I said, don't provoke the regime if possible, which is really hard because you're just so angry at them. Yeah. But yeah, you don't want to stick your head over the parapet yet. Something a lot of people complain about, but we talked about defense earlier. We can't go on offense yet because we just don't have the capability to deliver the metaphorical killing blow, right? So like, there's just no point in striking out at the king if we can't even conceive of harming him, right? It just doesn't make any sense.
That's a good way to get a totalitarian king.
Yeah, you're just going to get yourself killed. So yeah, it's a really bad sign. I'll take a look at the story and see what's going on there. But yeah, we're again, I think people probably underestimate like just how bad things might get.
Yes.
We get warned about China, America becoming more Chinese. I mean, we know what happened in East Germany in particular. Yeah, it's just weird. We've just had too comfortable a life, and I don't think people are really. I don't think people have really ingested like things actually could get worse. I mean, we could be in the most. We could quickly find ourselves in the most totalitarian regime the world has ever seen by far. And I'm not sure people have really taken that on board yet.
Right, and it could happen like
It's happening now.
quickly. Yeah,
it's happening now.
Right. Yeah. The point of no return could be upon us. On individual level for people, their individual point of no return is there's a lot of people who it's gonna go flying past them, and they're not gonna realize that it just passed them.
Yeah.
And again, this gets back to the whole thing about having competent, respectable leadership. People who are in positions of like publicly visible positions of authority and responsibility need to be embracing that and making the most of their positions, not squandering it on bad messaging or fruitful pursuits or fruitless pursuits. Because there's a lot of people are normies, but they don't, just because they're normies doesn't mean that they deserve to be squashed. They deserve good leadership. And I think that rather than debating about, we started a conversation off talking about freedom versus liberty, and rather than debating about what arbitrary freedom some individual should or shouldn't have, the people who recognize the evils of what's happening around us, the evils of the regime, they should be focused on attempting on bringing into or imaging into the world the types of values that will actually sustain any type of liberty, by taking leadership roles in their communities and protecting their families, creating families in the first place. Like, this is not the time for a political strategy. With a political strategy being an electoral strategy that's all about evangelizing people. This is libertarians just revealing that they're basically Protestants. That there is no, you don't need to evangelize. If you're going to get into politics, you're getting into politics from a strategic perspective, because you can actually carve off little segments of your neighborhoods and your communities, and you can like hunker down and you can try to weather the storm. Because ultimately there's going to be some type of war, there's going to be some type of economic collapse, there's going to be some type of something like that. But not everybody is going to experience it in the same way. So you don't have to experience that collapse if you can recognize that it's coming and recognize the different things that are happening, like Bannon. That just, it's going to get people riled up, and them getting riled up is going to rile other people up, and all of this stuff really serves to create a lot of collateral damage to try to pull as many people into the sphere of this like black hole that's developing within the regime. So ultimately, if you can get yourself out, then you should be focused on that and not some evangelistic strategy.
Yeah. People are needlessly, people just don't move enough, right? It's like they're very stagnant, and they're afraid of changing where they live or moving to a different country, and it's really not that big of a deal to do that. And you'll probably be much happier in the long run if you do it. So just take action. Like at this point, you should have some conception of what you can do to avoid the worst parts of the things that are coming down the road for us. And I think a lot of people just need to actually muster up the willpower and just actually take action. That's the sense I get, is that most people are just very passive, and they're not really making moves to protect themselves into the future.
Well, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for joining us here. Our supporting listeners group is subscribestar.com/kingpill. If you'd like to join us there, we had a really interesting conversation the other day. We've got a group. So for you to know, Charlemagne, I don't know if you've picked this up on the little bit that you'd watched before, but I'm basically in the process of converting to Orthodoxy. And I'm coming from a extremely Protestant perspective. There's a group of us in the supporting listeners group who are all either recently or like I think one guy's a catechumen, and there's a bunch of different people who are all in some sense affiliated with Orthodoxy, and then a few people who are interested in or well versed in Buddhism. And we had a really interesting conversation the other night about everything from quantum mechanics to to human psychology and demon possession and psychedelics and all the sorts of stuff that we were talking about today. We went really deep. That's at the Warlord subscription level. So we've got some fun stuff happening over there. So if you'd like to join us on our Discord, again, it's subscribestar.com/kingpilled. And then, do you have any plugs you want to make for yourself?
Yeah, so my Substack is charlemagne.substack.com. My Twitter is charlesmain2. The main thing I do, of course, is the YouTube channel. If you just search for Moldbug the Cathedral, you'll find my Charlemagne channel. And then, of course, a lot of my appearances are on Academic Agent's channel, the Cigar Stream, which we'll now be doing it every Wednesday. I'm the co-host on the Cigar Stream. I'm not on every one, but we're covering particular texts that we're looking at right now. So definitely check out Academic Agent's channel. And a good supplement to that channel, of course, is Skeptical Waves, who I think you actually mentioned earlier. He does just tons of text-to-speech, high-quality text-to-speech audiobooks on his YouTube channel. So yeah, check out Skeptical Waves.
Big agree on that one too. That's that's an invaluable service
Oh,
because I don't have
so
the ability
helpful.
to read very much. I'm on the move so much that I end up having to do everything through audio. So being able to get a lot of that stuff in an audio format that you can actually do other stuff and you don't have to sit there and try to listen to it the whole time. It's a fantastic service. Also, Stephen wants me to remind you that Stephen Messina edits good video. So if you he started himself a little side hustle doing video editing for people. So if you want to get in touch with him or just want to hear some of his jokes on Twitter, then you can follow him on Twitter at Messina Inc. MESSINAINC. And you can follow me on Twitter at Real Kingpilled. And yeah, this has been a good stream. I've appreciated this, Charlemagne. Thanks for showing up, and we should do this again sometime.
Yeah, this was a very enjoyable one.
Good. I'm glad. Talk to you later, buddy.